Daily Dose Learning has been sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Elon Hakimian for Refuah Shalema of Kol Cholei Am Yisrael. So for today, we are going to learn a little bit about Tisha Beav. Tisha Beav is tonight. Tani starts tonight and goes into tomorrow. And we have this little infograph, bullet point sheet, which was put together by Sephardic Midrash. I participated a little bit in writing this and putting it together. There are two kind of sets of dinim, two sets of halachot. There's things which started all the way from 3 weeks. There are some minhagim that 3 weeks, depending on which family, but even the Masharis, they kept some things for 3 weeks, even though generally it's Ashkenazim. That would keep things there.
Maybe the 9 days, right?
I would say it depends on what. It depends on which thing. But for example, like Mirza, he told me that in Iran they wouldn't get haircuts for 3 weeks. He said shaving they would do, but haircuts for 3 weeks they wouldn't do in Iran. It's like the Ashkenazim in Halachot. Sfaradim were more lenient about it in a lot of these things. Then many things are kept for 9 days, and then you get into Shavua Shechal Bo, meaning as you get closer to the day of Tisha B'Av, towards the day of the Churban, the Avelut, the mourning practices, get stricter. Until you get to the day of Tisha B'Av, Tisha B'Av is the day, we keep it basically like a day of Avelut. It's like a day of mourning, as if we are in mourning, in basically almost as if the same way we are mourning for a relative that passed away. This is a Avelut, it's a mourning for all of Israel. It's a mourning for the entire Am Yisrael. Right? So, during the week of Tisha B'Av, which is currently from right now, and the things which get added, some of these things Mashari families do for 9 days also. Right? We put the halachot over here. But laundry, we don't do laundry. I know from a lot of the women, the Masharis, 9 days, many of them, they wouldn't do it. No, not just only for laundry they wouldn't do. And wearing freshly laundered clothing, other than undergarments, you don't feel and dress as fresh as you normally do. Similar to, not that you have to wear torn clothes like in Avel, but it's not the same as you normally would. Haircuts and shaving. This week is halacha about haircuts and shaving. One should not get a haircut or shaved until the end of the ta'anit, until tomorrow, until Tuesday. Bathing and going to the pool. This is the one people know, and even the young generation they ask about. The other ones I don't know how much they know, but. Pool, minhag is not to go to the pool for leisure, and also not to take a shower. Same thing as for an avel, that they don't bathe for pleasure. Same thing here, you don't bathe for pleasure during this week. And when it comes to Tisha B'Av, not at all. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, you don't bathe at all. But today, for example, or during this week, colder shower, not a hot shower that you sit and you enjoy for 10, 15, 20 minutes. A little bit, not cold like you're freezing. Also, you don't have to make yourself sick from cold water. But
Strictly business, no singing.
Yeah, exactly.
In and out.
In and out. Don't sit and enjoy. What happened on Tisha B'Av? Chachamim listed for us 5 things. There's 5 things for which we're fasting on Tisha B'Av. 5 tragic events that we commemorate on Tisha B'Av. The earliest one and the first one that happened was the Chet HaMeragelim. You realize it's specifically related to Israel. They're all related to Israel. You have Israel and the Beit HaMikdash. The Jews accepted the report of the spies. They came and the 10 spies versus the 2. They shouldn't have listened to the 10 that they said Lashon Hara about Israel, and they said we're not going to be able to conquer Israel. It says Vayifku ha'am. It says the people believed them and they cried on that night. They said, we're not gonna be able to go into Israel. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna get killed. Why did Hashem take us here? Why did Hashem bring us to this point to go to Israel? And as the Midrash said, Hashem said, you're crying here for no reason when I guarantee that I'm gonna be with you. He says this is going to be a night for generations that you're going to cry. The Midrash says. So that was the first event. The next 2 events were the destructions of the first and second Beit HaMikdash, which are the primary events for which any of the rabbinic ta'aniyot which happened during the year, these were the two reasons. The first and second Beit HaMikdash were destroyed on the same exact date, on Tisha Beav. And today it's a little difficult to relate to. It's very difficult for our generation to relate to what the Beit HaMikdash meant and what the Beit HaMikdash was. But really, it was the heart of Am Yisrael. You picture in a lighter way. Lehavdil ben kodesh lechol uven hatameh uven hatahor. Someone invades the United States and they destroy the White House. The White House there, and they exile everybody, and they still want to keep the idea of America. They still want to keep the idea of America, and they more of that house which used to house all of our presidents, that house which used to that capital which used to house our Lehavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. This is times a million, right? The Beit HaMikdash was the heart and center of the Jewish people. It was the heart and center of Am Yisrael. It was where the Shekhinah, it was where the presence of Hashem used to dwell. It was where the bracha of the world used to come out from the Beit HaMikdash. There's if you read some of the stories from that time. You have Chagai. If anybody learns the beginning of Chagai, there was a Navi Chagai. At the very beginning of his Nevuah, the very beginning of his prophecy, he lived at the beginning of the second Beit HaMikdash, at the time that they were building the second Beit HaMikdash. This was 70 years after the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. There were 70 years between them. And at that time, he had a Nevuah, he received a Nevuah. His prophecy to the people in the beginning was criticizing them, why are you being lazy about building the second Beit HaMikdash? And at that time, there were people who still remembered the first Beit HaMikdash. Some of the very, very old people who were over age, so were in their 80s, they still remembered the first Beit HaMikdash. And he says, you remember what it was like. He tells them over there. You remember the bracha that came from the Beit HaMikdash. You remember that the fruits used to taste better. The food around the world used to taste better. You remember that you used to make money, and the money would stay with you. You wouldn't. He says today. He says Hamistaker at Tziron Akub. Everything gets eaten by taxes. It's like as if you have a hole in your pocket. All the money you make, there's a hole in your pocket. And he says you used to make money and you used to enjoy money. He says there was beracha that used to go to the whole world from the Beit HaMikdash. And he criticized them that they weren't getting back to building the Beit HaMikdash. At the time, at the first that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, it wasn't just that the building was destroyed. It was a massacre of Am Yisrael. It was a massacre. Hundreds of thousands of people that were killed from our people. Our leaders, our great leaders, the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, the heads of the Sanhedrin, our Supreme Court, was also located in the Beit HaMikdash, or the entrance of the Beit HaMikdash. Because we said the correct deen from Hashem has to come from the Beit HaMikdash. That's where the highest court has to sit. And also they had to answer all the questions that the Kohanim had in the Beit HaMikdash. All of that took place in the Beit HaMikdash. It was the heart and center of Am Yisrael. And also you look at the Torah. How many mitzvot do we have? We have 613. You know that maybe about 50% of those mitzvot, maybe even more, we're not able to have today because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. 50% or more. Then you read through it and you see how many mitzvot from the Torah we're keeping. And you say, where are all of them? From the 613. It's 50% or more that we're missing. And it was the center, it was the heart of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, was the Beit HaMikdash. At that time, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, there were people that were going to the point that they said, we don't want to eat meat ever again. We should make a halakha, we should never eat meat because we don't have korbanot. Anytime we eat meat, we remember the korbanot that we used to give. We shouldn't have meat anymore. We shouldn't have wine anymore. Ever. We shouldn't have wine. Why? Because we remember the nisachim that we used to pour the wine. We shouldn't do it anymore. We should not have it. They didn't want it anymore. After seeing all of the tragedy, after seeing all the suffering, after seeing the glory of the Jewish people going into ashes, after they see, when you read the beginning of Echa, and Echa and Yirmiyahu is walking through the city of Yerushalayim, and he says, what happened here? The most glorious city in the world, the city which used to bring the most honor and pride to God and to the Jewish people. And suddenly you see it looks like a ghost town. Everything was destroyed. You see poor people begging on the streets, looking for some food. The glory of Hashem has turned to this. This was the main suffering that we had. And Chachamim at that time, they said, listen, we can't sit and mourn our whole lives. We have to move on. We have to make sure to keep Torah. We have to make sure that the tradition stays alive. And that we have to keep the hope that Be'ezrat Hashem we're going to come back and we're going to build the Beit HaMikdash. But the Avilut has to continue. If we did not have Tisha Be'av, we might not have been back into Israel today. Who knows? You go out into Galut. If you're not saying, this is this country that we're living in, we're in the United States, or we're in Germany, or we're in Iran, or wherever we're spread out to, the Jewish people always said, you got in the middle of the summer months, the months where everybody's going out, we come out and we said, this is not our country. Our final destination is not over here. Our final destination is in Israel with the Beit HaMikdash. Every year we had to mourn. Every year and we continue to mourn. We continue to hope for the Beit HaMikdash. It's for this that we still have. It's for this that we were able to go back to Israel. It was for this that, think of any country that gets conquered and that gets exiled to another country. At some point you assimilate. How long are you going to remember the old country? How long are you going to remember where you used to live? How long are your grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to remember where you live? In Am Yisrael we did. Am Yisrael, to think that in the year, that's still in the 1900s, we were still thinking, let's go back to Yerushalayim. Our country is Yerushalayim. Our country is not France. Our country is not Germany or Italy or the United States of America. Our hope is to go back to Israel. And we are in Avelut over the fact that we're not in Israel. Because we know the glory and the pride of the world of Am Yisrael, and even Israel today. The amount that Israel has helped the world advance, Israel is the glory of the world comes from Israel. We're not fully there yet until we build the Beit HaMikdash. But it was this morning which enabled us to be able to even remember to go back to Israel. And to know that we have to go back to Israel and have it. This is the importance of this.
Signal the building of the second Beit HaMikdash? How did they know it's time to build the second Beit HaMikdash?
How did they know? There were continuous efforts to go rebuild it. They had a nevuah, first of all. They had prophets that told them that it's going to be 70 years. They knew there was a knowledge that it was going to be about 70 years, but they were consistently fighting to go out. And even the second Beit HaMikdash, when they built it, they didn't build it on the most ideal terms. They didn't build it in its beauty and its glory. They built it. It was much more humble. It says again, those same elders that remembered the first Beit HaMikdash, they were crying. They were crying when they saw it because they remembered how beautiful Shlomo HaMelech built the first Beit HaMikdash. And they said it wasn't the same for them. Until in the middle they started, when Herod renovated the second Beit HaMikdash, he made it the most beautiful building. But they said, whoever hasn't seen the second Beit HaMikdash, the beauty of it, after Herod renovated it, he's never seen beauty in his life. This is what they said about the second Beit HaMikdash. Whoever didn't see the beauty of the second Beit HaMikdash never saw beauty in his life. But in the beginning it was very humble. In the beginning, Ezra and Nehemiah, they struggled to convince the Jewish people to go back to Israel. It was a minority, it was a great minority of Israel that was in Israel at the time that they built the second Beit HaMikdash. And they said, however we do it, we have to build it. And you read the book of Ezra. Ezra was the greatest Zionist, the first Zionist, and you see Ezra, how much he struggled. Every time he started building, suddenly the people there said Lashon Hara to the emperor. They said the Jewish people want to rebel against you. They made them stop the project. they had to go back and they had to start rebuilding, and then they had to put guards all around because other people would come and they would try to sabotage the Beit. They struggled a lot.
This is short after the story of Purim, no?
This is shortly after the story of Purim. That's correct. The story of Purim happened between the Beit HaMikdash. Yes, but you see that they built it. They struggled for it. They didn't wait for a magic moment to go build the second Beit HaMikdash. They said we have to do it, and we have to find a way to do it, and we have to not worry about it, and we have to not worry about what anybody's going to say about us. It's very sad, I'm going to tell the truth, that we're still at a point, even in Israel today, where they're so afraid of the Arab world. And they're so afraid of the United Nations. They can't put metal detectors on Har HaBayit. They have to remove them because they're afraid of backlash from Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the Muslim world. And the worst one of all, we had the Har HaBayit. We had the Har HaBayit in 1967. Moshe Dayan HaRasha, he gave it back to them. We conquered the Temple Mount, we conquered Har HaBayit. We could have had synagogues up there right now if we didn't have the Beit HaMikdash already. Moshe Dayan said, no, take it back. Take it back. He gave it back to them. We only need the Kotel. We only need the Kotel HaMa'aravi. We don't need the Har HaBayit. Disaster. It's really a disaster. Until today, they're still afraid of the Arab. Mata, why are you afraid of the Arab world? This is ours. It's Shelanu. There's nothing to be afraid of. So you still have this unfortunate attitude of the Israeli leadership today. Anyhow, what were the other things that happened? Nil Kitab Biter was a city which was the center. It was one of the centers of the rebellion of Bar Kokhba. This was 70 years later, about after the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. The Jewish people revolted against the Romans. They wanted to win again, and they wanted to build a second Beit HaMikdash. They were successful in the beginning, Bar Kokhba. They were winning, and eventually, unfortunately, between themselves, there was between themselves. That was the second Beit HaMikdash was this whole time. But here they decided to revolt, and unfortunately, the revolt was crushed. And Betar, which was one of the Biter, depending how you pronounce it, was one of the cities, which was the hub. Maybe over 100,000 Jews that were there, massacred, all wiped out, all killed at the hands of the Romans. Their blood was flowing throughout the city like a river. They were saying there was blood flowing through the river, through the city like a river. So for many years, for over 10 years, they were not allowed to bury the bodies. They weren't allowed to bury the bodies. And in the end, the story goes that when they went back and they were finally given permission to bury the bodies were still intact. The bodies, they didn't rot. The corpses didn't rot, and they were able to bury the bodies of Biter. And whenever that happened, they made the fourth bracha of Birkat HaMazon, Hatov HaMetiv, whenever they were able to bury them. And the fifth thing which happened was Nefresha HaEchad. They didn't want to make Jerusalem, destroy it, and then have a museum there to remember that there was a Beit HaMikdash. They said, let's plow over the Har HaBayit, let's plow over the Beit HaMikdash and make it a field so nobody remembers. So nobody remembers that, and they made a new name for it, Aila Capitolina. They gave it a Roman name. There was never a Yerushalayim over here. Don't think, there was never a Washington, D.C. No, we give it a new name, our own name. Nobody should remember that there was a Yerushalayim. We never forgot. Okay, so we didn't get through all of it, but this is a very nice and useful thing to read through. It has all the different halachot. There was one thing we didn't include, which we forgot. I put over here. There's a very strong Mashari Minhag to visit the Beit HaKvarot. Those that they had someone who passed away, they visit the Beit HaKvarot during the day of Tisha Beav, the cemetery. It's one of the strongest minhagim that the Masharis have. Inshallah, we say in Tehillim, Samechenu kimot initanu. We say to Hashem, please make us rejoice in the way that you made us suffer, in parallel to the way you made us suffer. And the Chachamim tell us, whoever mourns over Yerushalayim, the proper way, Zocheh v'roeh et simchata. You'll have the zechut to see the glory and the happiness of Yerushalayim returned and restored. Bezrat Hashem to our people very soon. Amen. Keni Ratzon.
Rabbi.